in recent days, we've seen some rather dubious characters being released from jail. Uh, People with known association with not just local but also international terrorist organizations. And there is a lot of disquiet in India as to what exactly the interim government is playing at. Are we going back to that period of 2001 to 2006 that Smriti was talking about just now? Are we going to see some of that come back? Are we seeing a reversal of all the progress that has been made? What and since you deal a lot in terrorism, you study it very closely. What is your analysis of what might be happening?
Thank you very much. I think we're we're stuck in the past. We need to move forward. The very simple reason is, if you look at the rise of the Generation Z, has overthrown a mighty political party in just matter of 2 weeks. That's something absolutely extraordinary. So the discussion that Shruti and you had is essentially 20 years back. What happened? 15 years later, 20 years move forward. If you look at Bangladesh, this is absolutely a different Bangladesh. The new generation of voters, new generation of people who have come to the upper echelon, middle echelon, and lower echelon of the society. So therefore, I think the conversation that we had back in 2001, 2006, and probably 2009 has largely become dormant. I mean, let me start with one of the comments that you have made, and which made me very intrigued when you say that whether India is damn if it does and whether it is not. The very simple issue is, when the foreign policy comes to a moment when damn if we do and damn if we don't, then it is not a foreign policy, it was just a political policy. So therefore, the problem lies is the way we see Bangladesh's political parties is extremely parochial. Now, the whole discussion about Jamaat that I was listening to, and yes, Jamaat had a very complicated past. So is Awami League. I mean, even if you look at Awami League's 15 years, I mean, what a terrible mess it was. I mean, look at the Digital Security Act. The moment you say something, you are behind the bar. I mean, is it better than Jamaat's past? If I take Jamaat's, if it was at all a rogue party, I mean, certainly not. I mean, look at the people. I mean, everyone, every Tom, Dick, and Harry, or every top echelon is behind the bar. The people who has been released, if you look at their legal proceedings, and I had the privilege of reading many of their legal documents, the cases is so ridiculously weak, which doesn't even stand in the court for 20 minutes of discussion. I mean, you have sent somebody by saying that this guy is a terrorist. I mean, absolutely, I agree. If there is a case of terrorist, then what is the content of your case? And the case is absolutely on the basis of, we heard that he's a terrorist. You can't do that. I mean, in a civil country. And that's where the problem is. I mean, I'm not saying that giving free cheek to everyone is the best idea, but certainly the cases that I have looked into is absolutely ridiculously weak cases. The second problem is, when you have mentioned that what about the political parties beyond Awami League? Didn't Washington reach out to all the political parties, whether it is CPB, Jamaat, or BNP? Didn't Beijing? I mean, look at the 5th of August, the 6th of August, the Chinese ambassador was with everyone. Now, that tells you a very good story, isn't it? Now, when I look into the extremism was, even in 2014, 2015, I was repeatedly saying, don't overuse this particular Jongi thing. I mean, the Jongi, in a sense, that terrorism, extremism thing. There has always been a trend of extremism. That has been the case across the South Asia. I mean, Sheikh Hasina has always remained silent when the minorities were being persecuted in India. I mean, look at Northeast India, for an example. Had she been able to speak up something, she would have probably gained a vast majority support immediately. I mean, this cannot be only the minority thing is for Bangladesh and rest of the world is absolutely pious. I don't think that works. Every party has Subramaniam Swamy factor. I mean, look at Mr. Subramaniam Swamy's statements. I mean, in Bangladesh, everybody read. I mean, Tom, Dick, and Harry, everybody read. I mean, talking about taking 1/3 of Bangladesh and so on. And there are people in every political party in Bangladesh too. Does it mean that this reflects Bangladesh's public? It doesn't reflect Bangladesh's public. And that's exactly what Delhi didn't understand. My understanding of extremism in the coming years is not going to be an issue unless the interim government reflects on the public perception. And the public perception, the term secularism, it's pretty much like when COVID came, we started to talk about quarantine. Who understands quarantine in Bangladesh? Who understands quarantine in India? Who understands quarantine in Pakistan? I mean, pretty much we came up with a beautiful bag and narratives of secularism. 99% people didn't understand what is secularism. So therefore, is it a pluralism are we talking about? And that's something Awami League missed out. So Awami League became very much biased and very much obsessed with the term jongi, which is extremism, by labeling anybody who is going to mosque and who is going to talk Islamic issues in the public, and it automatically becomes equated with non-secular entity. And that was a major narrative fault. And I wrote about it by saying that the history project or the secularism project that Awami League undertook was very much politically motivated rather than socially motivated, or perhaps to reflect or denote progress. Look at the education sector over the past 15 years. I mean, for God's sake, I'm a professor myself, and every morning I used to become scared that what am I going to do in the classes next time? So the problem was the entire education system was so polarized, and the recruitment and the structure of education was so polarized that the cognitive ability to understand the concepts such as secularism literally became absolutely obsolete, or perhaps was not being received by the society. The society became extremely. I did a very interesting study for the UN where I looked into why women wear veil. And that study was an empirical study, quantitative study. And then when it came out, what was the number one reason for women wearing hijab? Is it essentially religious? No, it was security. A significant women said that the preference of hijab comes from the security question. Now, it was conveyed to the government by saying, look, this is one issue that people are working on thin eyes, and if you don't address security issues, then they will always fall into the rightist interpretation of security, and that's exactly what is happening. Now, coming to current issues in Bangladesh, I mean, I certainly do see that Bangladesh is not going to be a typical case study of secular state. I mean, neither is India nor is Pakistan or Myanmar in that matter. I mean, we are going to see certainly a much more indigenous constructed idea of religion, which may not be as perceived by the elites of different intellectual societies. So let it the public to come out. And public essentially sees that the religion has always been a factor, will remain factor, whether it will become much more consolidated, whether it will become much more liberating, or whether it will become much more what I would say socially conducive, that we don't know. We have to wait and see how it unfolds. So therefore, I don't think that understanding, seeing Jamaat or BNP from the prism of religious construct will help Delhi at any point of time. And the last point that I think is extremely important, that if Delhi really wants to look forward with Bangladesh. And I understand Ambassador Das is here, served in Bangladesh. I'm quite sure by now everybody has figured out that the new generation that we have, we cannot really tag them with some sort of Islamophobic or non-Islamophobic. Rather, we have to see them from a much more global perspective. And most of the movements that you get to see that comes from the Gen Z is linked with the global movement too. And these kids are not isolated from the global system. I mean, these kids are absolutely proficient in terms of using technology better than you and me. And these kids are much more exposed to global issues than you and me, for sure. And these people are much more conversant and possesses ability to maneuver through different movements and different spectrum of society. So the problem that we have always forgotten is to really address beyond religion, beyond Jamaat or BNP or Awami League's ideological stance is the economic priorities. And that economic priorities is the same case for Bangladesh, same case from India, same case from Pakistan. So that's why I think we need to really see extremism much more related to whether the parties are able to deliver or whether they allow them to get alternatives, whether they allow to give them voices. I mean, former political party, I mean, former Awami League, I mean, frankly speaking, did they allow anyone to speak? I mean, the way I'm speaking, I mean, my gosh, I mean, think about it 6 months back. Probably by now I would have gotten some sort of message on my mobile that hey, you gotta be careful. I mean, that's not happening. I mean, that's the claustrophobic fear. So I think this is best time that we need to see all the political parties as political parties come forward and help them to really articulate the best of the options that they can create for these Generation G, which will be in the helm of power in the coming months. And if you look at the interim government, I mean, interim government didn't hesitate to have three, below 25 kids to be a part of the cabinet. Why did they do so? Military allowed that. I mean, I won't say allowed that. That's the wrong way of saying. Military agreed that these kids should be in the interim too. Although interim government doesn't interfere into any of the day-to-day businesses or anything, but certainly everybody appreciated by saying that this is even Dr. Yunus is going to the UN next week, and in the UN you are going to see that absolutely fascinating young motivated kids are going with him. Now that's where the whole thing is.
You are saying that the political parties are probably not in a position to participate in elections, but at least from the statements from some of the political parties, it seems that they are very keen on early elections, and they are very uncomfortable with the prospect of the interim government, continuing for any length of time or taking decisions of a far-reaching nature, which does not have a popular consensus backing those decisions. Like the BNP wants early elections. I'm sure if elections were to be called in 2 or 3 months' time, every political party would jump into the fray. So I'm a little perplexed by your claim that the parties are not ready and they would also not mind waiting for some time.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the BNP's statements over the past few weeks, it's clear that they want to give the interim government time and reasonable time. And it is very practical for them. Whenever I speak to them, they're pretty clear because that reform and getting the election commission and the electoral bodies to become functional will legitimately take a long time. I mean, they're willing to wait till that. And I think when they mean early election, which I'm not aware of, but when they mean early election is not that you go for indefinite periods like 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Rather, at some point of time, you have to give it timeline. And I actually wrote an article last week by saying that it is very important for the interim to come up with a roadmap and essentially lay out what is their timeline or lifespan would be. So I don't think that BNP is in a position to dictate that they will be in the election in 2-3 months. I don't think that is happening. Rather, what they're saying that they want to give time to interim government to come up with some sort of solution. When it comes to Jamaat, which is even more interesting, Jamaat didn't really come up with a statement by saying that we want an early or late or any time, any sort of time frame. Rather, Jamaat's logical position would be, and which I understand is rational from their point of time too, is to wait and see. how the interim government goes and how the interim government functions. So essentially, I think there is an impatience in the grassroots when it comes to the political parties. I mean, we are seeing a little bit of symptom of what we used to see back in time, but not certainly this is the reflection of the party hierarchy. So therefore, I think what I would claim over here with after my regular consultation with different parties is essentially they're willing to give time to interim government, and interim government has to decide. And perhaps the interim government is essentially saying that we will require time. That can, some says 3 years, some says 2 years. But again, it depends all on the fluidity of the situation. And most certainly, there is no way we will be seeing any kind of election coming up at least a year from now, at least a year.
We're easy targets, we are also easy targets in Bangladesh itself. So I've done 2 rounds in Bangladesh. I've done when I was a much younger diplomat in 99 to 2002, and as High Commissioner. But I think, diplomats function under certain constraints. Obviously, we have a lot of constraints. We work under constraints. And in our neighborhood, we are under constant scrutiny 24/7. Whatever we do, no matter at what level you are posted, you don't have to be the High Commissioner to be under constant scrutiny. We have to remember the history of Bangladesh, the circumstances of East Pakistan, Bangladesh coming up, and the fact that the country has not been able to develop deep democratic roots. For years after Sheikh Mujib's assassination, we've had General Zia, General Ershad, who rewrote the history. After that, when Prime Minister, when BNP came to power, I mean, it is very well to, you can say that, Jamaat and BNP, you do business with them, but, and the Chinese went and met them. The Chinese did not have the experience that we had in 2001 and 2006. And as you mentioned, that it was an absolutely horrific, traumatic experience for us in terms of our security. The insurgent groups which were operating out of Bangladesh, the day after the bomb blasts in the 64 districts, the arms hall in Chittagong, which was directly under the supervision of a Jamaat minister. So, and this is not, history which happened 100 years back. This happened only recently. Since then, the onus is not only on us to build the bridges, the onus is also on the other side to reassure us. As High Commissioner, I have met the BNP many times, and every time I've said the same thing, that you have to reassure us that, you actually want genuine friendship with us, which is, you look after every visit, even now that transit MOU was criticized as being, you've given up the sovereignty. Have you even read the thing? I mean, has anybody read it? The constant criticism is that India is going to move troops through the railway. But there is a clause which says troops are not going to be moved. There is a clause which says it will respect all national laws and your obligations. So you see, that step BNP also has to take, to reassure the government of India. And of course, Jamaat is a different thing altogether. The Jamaat's their role is, we are very cognizant of what they have done, and the terrorists who have been allowed to, who have been freed, actually cases have been dropped, no legal proceedings have taken place. It's not exactly rule of law which is being followed. So what we are seeing in some ways in Bangladesh is what Awami League was accused of. The same, extortion rackets are operating. Why did BNP have to remove almost 500 of its workers? They've taken disciplinary action against almost 500 party workers because of doing the same thing which the Awami League was accused of doing. And as to the new generation, the young, the young students who are at the forefront of all of this, we really don't know what their ideology is, what they're thinking, what they want. We've just heard some, public statements saying that they want an inclusive government. But there is no clarity in that sense on, where are they coming from? Because clearly it's a very polarized politics, but where do they stand in this is really not something which we know.
Um, Thank you. Thank you for the insights, especially Patnaik ma'am, Smruti ma'am, and Ganguly ma'am, and all the other panelists like Shahab and most important Smita Sharma, who left the panel. I especially thank her because she is given the report on from the ground. So I have kind of two questions. So to Mr. Shahab, how do you assess India's position in this whole upside down in your country? We have just few days back, we had Sheikh Hasina here in Delhi. And afterwards, when this happened, she was again here. So how do you assess all this from your country's perspective, India's position and all the things? And the second thing is to you, Sushant.
I'm just the moderator. They are the panelists.
Okay, yes. I respect that you're the moderator, and I respect that you were being the devil's advocate, right? But the thing is, sometimes I felt like you were putting words into Smita's mouth. You wanted to say
Okay.
her.
Let me answer your question before I take some more questions. If anybody thinks anybody can put any words in Smita's mouth, they don't know Smita. So forget it. I think you are off the mark on that. Smita is an independent journalist. She's an old friend. She's a sparring partner. We keep fighting with each other on many issues. So if you think I'm putting words in her mouth,
No, she didn't. She didn't let you put.
Of course she
but
won't.
she was. You were trying hard.
Anyway, we'll discuss my association with her later. Yes.
I'm Deepak. I have two questions. First to Riva ma'am. Ma'am, only a few months back when India-Bangladesh rail link deal was signed as an alternative to the Siliguri corridor, and there was a huge crime from the Bangladeshi opposition claiming that it is only for India's benefits. So the probable chance being that the BNP comes into the power in near future, how do you see the future of Hasina era's deal, like the railway deal, will they be in jeopardy? And second question is to Professor Shahab. Sir, we saw how a certain pressure group and protesters forced the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to resign and to step down. And even in Pakistan, when the military coups were deemed unconstitutional, they introduced this doctrine of necessity. So how do you see these kind of extra constitutional measures set precedent for the future of Bangladeshi governance and its stability?
Jaspreet Gupta, and I'm a journalist with Business Standard. So in fact, firstly, I'd like to back with what Ms. Smita mentioned, because I was also covering a story on Bangladesh, although I didn't have the resources to kind of go to Bangladesh at present. So I was doing it from the capital itself. And I think when she mentioned that there's a sort of a gray area between the coverage. Yeah, I'll just... We've run out of time. Yeah, perfect. I'll just cut it really short. So I think there's one thing that we really need to be conscious as a viewer is that the media is definitely going to polarize a lot of issues, but then that's at our part to kind of take that. Now, my question is to Ambassador Das. So I think one of the major tourism areas that we have with Bangladesh is medical tourism. So if I'm not wrong, around 3 to 4 lakh medical tourists, they come to India every year, right? And recently, 𝐈𝐧𝐝𝐸𝐚 had put in visa closures for a lot of Bangladeshi students. If I'm not wrong, the last I checked, they've been open for certain emergency cases and for education, if that's correct. But from what I could foresee, the elections are not going to happen maybe in an year or so. So when do we look forward to the opening of visas for normal tourists, and especially for medical tourism? Because if that's not going to happen, the people, they'd have to resort to other places like Singapore, like Maldives, which I think are the go-to destinations apart from India. But that's going to be very costly for them. So how do we go about that?
Wonderful to see this discussion. My question is to Professor Shahab Khan. I didn't quite get what you mentioned in the last bite of yours about the Chinese ambassador meeting everybody. Everybody who? You meant the political parties or? Okay. And in continuation, Was there any exodus from the many Chinese who are there for defense projects and other projects, civil infrastructure projects? And how do you see them connecting with the interim government, which is going to be there as per you at least for a year?
To begin with, you said we have relation with government to government and B2B or G2G. So can we say that we are going to sacrifice Sheikh Hasina because nobody is giving her asylum? So she will be compelled to go back to Bangladesh and she may be prosecuted and maybe hanged also. Second question to Professor Shah. To begin with, the USA and China were the main player to create this situation. Now they are keeping silence. So what is their game plan? How they are going to deal with this situation? Thank you.
Nanda Gupta from Strat News Global. I just have a very quick question. There's a headline which I see in front of me. It says, looks at question to Dr. Professor Khan. Sorry. Professor Khan, there's a headline which I'm reading right now, which says that, which essentially looks like Jamaat, protesting against the national anthem because it was written by Tagore. And then says that it is clear that secularism in Bangladesh was an elite enterprise unsupported by the masses. Would you agree?
My name is Madhushri Dwivedi. I'm from 𝐈𝐧𝐝𝐢𝐚. I just wanted to ask that if Awami League was in power since 2009 and now that Sheikh Hasina is out of India, what is going to happen to Awami League in Bangladesh?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Siddharth Abror from DCAC Paul Science Honors. My question is to Smriti ma'am. There have been incidents regarding targeted Hindu violence in Bangladesh. So is the Hindu community being targeted or the Awami League vote bank is being targeted? And if Awami League vote bank is targeted, then are the Muslims who are in support of Awami League getting under the cover of being against the Awami League or not? Thank you.
Okay, so now for the answers, Smriti, I think you have some. So you go first. Professor Khan can go next. Ambassador Das can finish it all off because she's to blame anyways for everything that's happening.
Thank you. I don't have much question, but I also would like to draw everybody's attention to Yunus's address to nation at 7:30 today. So probably that will provide us a lot of answer, which you have been discussing now. What is happening to Awami League? I would say that, both BNP and Awami League, in spite of what Awami League did to the BNP, has more than 30% of public support. That is something which is given. And that is the other 40% which decides who will come to power. And these are grassroots political parties, including whatever support Jamaat has. They have support on the ground. So therefore, I would say that currently, of course, the Awami League is in back foot because of what the leaders have done in the last few years. Obviously, Hasina leaving in such a manner has, in fact, there were also interviews where, people have not named them, said that, the manner in which she left, many of the party workers are demoralized. But we really do not know what happened in the last minute, what was the negotiation between her and, the army chief. What exactly brought her here? What did the Indian government exactly said when this request was made? There are many gray areas which you really do not know. That is where whenever people speak of extradition of Sheikh Hasina, I always ask that, first, why didn't the army take her to the custody? Because it is army. They can provide the security which nobody else can provide. To try her for the corruption, misgovernance, all that she did. Once you send her in the military aircraft to Delhi and they say you extradite. So the right kind of question should be asked to the powerful people. Why not? To them. So I always have thought about it. As far as the Hindu community is concerned, yes, the attacks, anywhere the vulnerable community are always, at the receiving end. So the Hindu community were attacked because they are perceived. I'm not saying all of them do support the Awami League, maybe the majority of them, but there are quite a few Hindu leaders in the BNP also. So the Hindu community were targeted because they were seen as supporters of the Awami League. And there is, people in Bangladesh tell me there is also economic aspect of the property and all to be grabbed. And the Awami League workers were equally targeted. So it's not just the Hindu community. The Awami League workers were also equally targeted. Now, somebody told me, I was reading some of the posts of some people who played a very significant role in the student movement. People are asking, the manner in which the prosecution happened during Hasina's time, the same manner it is happening at present. Like, for example, a murder case will be registered, against Hasina and 20 others. And what I read from those, because it's very difficult to know, newspapers are not writing, so through your own, when you speak to people, the 20 others is filled up by whomever you can grab. Put them in that 20 others. So Hasina, then, Salman F. Rahman, then blah, 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 all those people. So that is the kind of thing happening. Exactly, as I saw, what was happening during Hasina's period, many of the things are being repeated. And I really do not know, actually what is the end result. It's the same revenge politics, is the same. So I have been watching Bangladesh for a very long time. So I see the same kind of cycle again happening. I don't know. I think it's a time they should get out of this. The reforms we have seen 2007-8, there were reforms which were introduced, brought in by the military-backed caretaker regime now. Now people are also speaking of reform. We really do not know what that will end at. So therefore, I would say that but I would say that Bangladesh people are definitely pro-democracy. They always want to participate in the election, no matter whomever they elect. So therefore, I would say that both the political parties will stand a chance. We saw after 2 years when the election happened, in spite of what BNP did between 2001 to 2006, I'm not speaking of India internally, especially the 2005 bomb blast, the Chittagong, 𝐏𝐨𝐬𝐿, the 21st August, attack on the 𝐈𝐴𝐚 League rally. In spite of that, people are very angry. But then again, it got 30 seats when it contested the election after 2 years. So I think these are historical parties, so there is a chance of them surviving.
FIR story sounds so much like Pakistan. This is what they do out there as well. Anyways, but Professor Shahab, the floor is yours. There is a number of questions. I've lost track of how many questions were put to you. I'm sure you've kept track. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Too many questions, but what I love about this discussion is that we're quite free and frank. I apologize at the beginning if I skip anyone's question, because it was very difficult for me to keep track of all the questions. The first question, let me put it in my own way so that it becomes a narrative in itself. The Chinese ambassador. Well, I mentioned, when I mentioned Chinese ambassador, I mentioned that he immediately, on the 6th and 7th of that was the time still the political parties or caretaker government was not in function, reached out to all the political parties, because you are absolutely correct that there is a huge number of Chinese people are working in Bangladesh, the huge number of investment going on, and it was very pragmatic of him to really go and everywhere. And then, of course, when the interim government came, it is same thing that what Washington did, Beijing did the same thing. So I think they had a similar approach to the post Sheikh Hasina, and they were prepared for that since the movement took place. This is one. There's a small disclaimer to our great host. I didn't compare between Subramaniam Swamy or Bangladesh or any. What I meant is that these examples are everywhere, and we can go and count on these examples, but that doesn't really mean that we are comparing each other. But certainly what I'm reflecting on is what people essentially banks on sometimes. Yes, there is the question about whether people are going and lynching, mob lynching, and I wrote about it last week, and by saying that this bulldozer justice or media trial is not helping. And in many cases, in fact, the advisors came out and gave a statement by saying a lot of cases that has been filed against Awami Leaguers are essentially going to make the cases weaker. And that's where I wanted to touch upon what Ambassador Das has mentioned. And it's the same case when I looked into many of the cases against all those who were kept in jail on the ground of extremism. And I looked into that. this is not a problem of terrorism, rather the problem of the guy who has lost the case and the guy who was at the legal system. And therefore, I think when you go for a neutral judgment at this case at this moment, and this cases gets dropped off, and whether we should blame extremism or the legal proceedings or the guy who has filed the case or who has investigated, that's something. And I have written extensively about it, that the public prosecutors in Bangladesh are one of the most alarming figures who are absolutely no idea about how, in many cases, how to file DSA cases, how to file anti-terrorism cases, and so on. And that was bound to happen. And this has been echoed by the current advisors too. The question about the future of Awami League is very important. And I think Shruti has rightly mentioned, I mean, it is too early to say whether Awami League will perish or Awami League will return to the public. And a few days back, the question was if Bangladesh goes for an election which is quote, inclusive, unquote, then the situation is different. And if it goes through the same prescription that Awami League had, that participatory and credible, then the answer is absolutely different. That's something that we have to wait and see. It's been only 4 weeks, frankly speaking. I mean, 4 weeks, police is still grasping. Even if you look at the bureaucracy is in a deep shamble at the moment. People are writing their own promotion. People are writing that. So that's a problem that will happen in a transition. As I mentioned earlier, that when Dr. Yunus came, did he have any kind of political party? I mean, look at the Awami League, and I mentioned that this is a system where from prime minister to a khatib of a mosque or an imam, everybody fled away. So that's a massive problem that we have incurred. When it comes to the insurgent groups, yes, I do agree that there was a case of insurgent group. This is exactly the reason why both all the political parties and the Indian political parties and certainly Indian government and the interim government at some point of time should come together when the dust settles down. I mean, this is too high. We also have to understand this is only 4 weeks. So I think this sort of discussion today or tomorrow will take place for the betterment of both the sides. And that's why I think the best strategy at the moment is to wait and see at least for a few more days. As Shruti has mentioned, that chief advisor is probably going to give a new direction today. I mean, the last time when he addressed the nation, it was only 2 weeks. What is he going to tell you? I mean, is he going to tell that 6 months of time I'm going to hold an election? If he cannot reform the election commission, no one wants to be the vice chancellor of any of the universities in Bangladesh, because they think that if we become vice chancellor, then things may not go in the right order. That's a massive problem that this interim government incurred. There is a very difficulty. I mean, a lot of people have been offered to become the chair of the Public Service Commission. Is it people are ready? Many of the people are not. I mean, this is a major problem. That's why the term human resources came up repeatedly. So the vacuum is really, really deep. And the last point that I would like to focus on, and I think this is where the large issue lies. Whenever we are reading any kind of prime ministerial statement coming from Delhi or any other places, it's all about one group of people. I still couldn't see. I mean, you see that 700 plus people died, I mean, over 2 weeks of time. And that's something that has not been discussed. There's no empathy from many of the corners. And particularly Awami League's one of the greatest peril was that they forgot to be empathized to the causes that the students came up with. I mean, look at the 700. I mean, where would you get to see in a civil, in a civic society that their own people opens live fire against own people? I mean, that's exactly the problem that we have to incur, and that's where most of the concerns will be there. I do see that the relationship between Bangladesh and India will always be very important for anyone who comes to power. And Do we think that Jamaat and BNP doesn't understand it? Of course they do understand. The problem is whether Delhi understands that they understand what they understand. So I think rather than having a lot of questions about or perceived denial or perhaps living in bubble is probably not going to give us the best solutions. Rather, pragmatic conversation with Dhaka, whether it is civil society and the new civil society mandate in Dhaka. I mean, not that define the civil society that you go and mix X and Y. And Ambassador Das is here. I mean, I can just spell out one of my very personal experience two months back regarding my own visa. It took 3 months and I couldn't get my passport back. I mean, then we're talking about 1960s, 70s, going back to, the rail line and everything. And goddamn, I couldn't get my passport back in 3 months. I don't think that sort of reality is often being discussed in Delhi. And perhaps in future, I think we have to be much more pragmatic. And I think Delhi has an incredible resources, incredible civil society, which can always come together and create a better atmosphere between these two countries. Thank you very much.